is there needs to be a peaceful transition to democracy in Venezuela. Now, the benchmark of all actions of all countries is, of course, international law, and it is for the US to justify its actions accordingly. My focus is on the defence and security of the United Kingdom, and yesterday we were working with NATO allies, including the US, on security guarantees for Ukraine, and it's only with security guarantees that we'll have a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, which is vitally important for Ukraine, for Europe and for the United Kingdom.
Sir Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister just looks ridiculous when he won't tell the truth that Trump has broken international law. But turning to Donald Trump's next target, the Prime Minister was right to give the Danish Prime Minister his backing over Trump's threats to annex Greenland, and I welcome his joint statement with other European leaders. But does he also agree that if Trump does attack Greenland, it will be the end of NATO? And given that frightening possibility, does he accept that the UK needs to increase defence spending more quickly than currently planned and build new alliances with reliable nations?
Mr. Speaker, let me be. The Greenland issue is obviously very, very important. I thank him for raising it. The future of Greenland is for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark, and for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. And yesterday, he will have seen that I put out a statement to that effect, along with fellow allies in Europe. And of course, NATO is hugely important, the single most effective and important military alliance the world has ever known. He keeps encouraging me to sort of tug away at parts of NATO and to choose between Europe and the US. That would be a strategic mistake for our country. And yesterday we were working with our NATO allies, including the US, our NATO ally, on a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. That will not happen without security guarantees from the coalition of the willing, backed by the United States. That's a vitally important issue, and we made progress on that. And there won't be a just and lasting peace in Ukraine without those security guarantees, and not achieving a just and lasting peace in Ukraine is not in our national interest, and that's why I'm applying so much time and energy to seeking to get that outcome.
Prime Minister, even its strongest advocates acknowledge that Northern Ireland is trapped in dysfunction, and not because reform is impossible, but because the DUP and Sinn Féin haven't allowed it. We've become a political Hotel California where the past is always around, but the future never arrives. There's growing public consensus that some of Stormont's procedures simply aren't working, and the SDLP has found slivers of common ground across the political parties too. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that now is the time for a structured conversation which protects power sharing but which addresses the culture of veto and decline, so Stormont might finally take responsibility and start to deliver for the people?
Well, can I thank her for her question? The Belfast Good Friday Agreement is one of the greatest achievements of the last Labour government, and it enshrined Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom and set out, as she well knows, I know, clear principles and processes under that framework. I'm aware of the Assembly and Executive Review Committee inquiry into institutional reform, but I can indicate that we're always happy to discuss any proposals for reform which would lead to a consensus.
Gavin Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, you will be aware of the grave concerns that abound around the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill, particularly amongst veterans and particularly among those who stand up for and speak out for the interests of those who defend our nation. And they have read the 6 protections in the bill and they don't see them as such. They offer no protection, they are procedural, and they apply to terrorists too.
They do.
So will the Prime Minister confirm that what we have heard is true, that the Ministry of Defence and the Northern Ireland Office intend to bring forward government amendments that will specifically and particularly protect veterans, and that they will offer protection?
Well, can I thank him for his question, and I know how deeply he feels about these issues. The bill, as he knows, will put in place new measures designed specifically to protect veterans. These safeguards have been developed with veterans in mind after carefully listening to their concerns. They have no respect at all, have they, for this issue? We've been meeting with veterans' organisations and listening to their views, and when the bill reaches the committee stages, the House will see the result of those considerations, and you'll be pleased to hear that. We're determined to ensure protections are as fair and effective as possible, recognising the role that service personnel played in keeping people across the UK safe during the Troubles, and I thank him for his question.
Rachel Muskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having met with many independent business owners, they fear the cumulative impact of the rateable value revision and relief reductions. In York, hospitality sees an average business rate rise of 41%, a music venue 44.4%, and many independent shops increases around 27%. It will mean doors closing and trade ceasing. They just can't do it. So could the Prime Minister urgently review the business rate proposals, and will he ensure a minister or official attends my business rate summit at the end of January, as I want to avert a crisis on York's High Street?
Can I thank her for raising that issue? As she knows, during COVID, the rates went down, and that was coming to an end. And that's why we put in place interim relief as we move to the new rates. Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to work with and talk to the sector on that support and what further support and action we can take.
Sir Albee.
Mr. Speaker, the period after Christmas can be a challenging time for many people, and consequently the month of January consistently sees higher rates of suicide than at other times of the year. But suicide is preventable and lives can be saved. Education, raising awareness, targeting vulnerable groups are all effective suicide prevention strategies, and I was pleased to see them in the recent Men's Health Strategy. But I'm calling on the Government to go a step further and to launch a public health campaign to encourage discussions about suicidal thoughts and ideations. So will the Prime Minister agree to continue this conversation with me, and will he state his support for a public health campaign to tackle the worryingly high number of deaths from suicide in this country?
Can I thank her for raising this issue and assure her that we want to work with all colleagues across the House on this crucial issue, and it's in our interest to do so. We did, as she said, launch the first ever Men's Health Strategy, announcing over £3.5 million into supporting suicide prevention support programmes, recruiting over 7,000 mental health workers, including access to talking therapies, rolling out mental health support teams in schools. It is vital that we raise awareness and increase the support available, and I can assure her ministers would be happy to discuss her proposals with her, because I genuinely want to work across the House on this really serious and tragic issue.
Masterson.
I was very pleased to hear that the government's latest announcement about the rollout of the chickenpox vaccine. This, of course, is in stark contrast to the vaccine conspiracy theories being peddled by Reform. Does my right honourable friend agree that it is only with a Labour government that healthcare in this country is safe, and that Reform must never, ever be in a position to be responsible for the health of this country?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased about the measures we're able to announce this week. Of course, that comes on top of the 5 million extra appointments that we've delivered in the first year of a Labour government, and 300,000 taken off the waiting list, and more to come as we turn the year into 2026. But he's absolutely right. They laugh at the denial of the importance of vaccines. Imagine where this country would be if they ever saw power. And if you want an example, or to be like, look at the local councils where they won power. They're absolutely chaotic, in a mess, and putting taxes up.
Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unlike many of his parliamentary colleagues, I don't actually think the Prime Minister should resign. But at the start of a new year, it's time to reflect, reset, detox, if you will, on his government's appalling economic policies and tax rises, particularly business rates and the impact it's having on the hospitality sector. Now, will the Prime Minister commit to doing that today?
Mr. Speaker, I'll reflect on the fact that inflation is falling and the Bank of England says that it's going to be down to target. I'll reflect on the fact that we've had 6 interest rate cuts in a row. Mortgages, those with mortgages will be hugely effective. I'll reflect on the fact the IMF say we're going to have the second highest growth in 2025, defying the forecast. And I'd remind them that under them we had inflation at 11%, the worst Parliament on living standards on record, and the Leader of the Opposition thinks that Liz Truss was 100% right to crash the economy. They're literally the only people who think that anybody should be listening to them. Nobody is.
John Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Adrian Howe was a successful and dedicated Vodafone store manager of over 20 years. In 2017, he was offered the opportunity to take on a franchise of one of their thriving stores. But then the goalposts changed, and he was then forced to take on a struggling store. And just days before he was due to open that store, Adrian stepped into a lake. Widow, my constituent Tracy, is wondering if the Prime Minister will review franchising legislation to ensure there is a balance of power between companies and the
House in saying I'm deeply sorry to hear about this tragic case, and all our thoughts are with the family. Obviously, there's a live legal case I can't comment on, but I can reassure her that we'll look closely at the final outcome of that case. There are strong rules in place, but we will look at the outcome of the case to see whether there's more that can be done.
Alison Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Late last year, the cargo vessel Baltic Clipper lost 16 containers off the beautiful West Sussex coastline. Beaches and seas in my Bognor Regis and Littlehampton constituency have been polluted with toxic debris. The clean-up was initiated and led almost exclusively by resolute local volunteers. So will the Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to to ensure that the coastline is restored and that local taxpayers will not pick up any costs?
Well, let me pay tribute to them and join her in doing that. Liability sits with the polluter, and agencies and her local authority should work with the responsible party to recover the costs. I will make sure that she gets the meeting that she has asked it for with the appropriate minister.
Ian Hamilton.
Mr. Speaker, I recently met with bereaved constituents who lost their babies at Leeds Teaching Hospital's NHS Trust. Now, understandably, their confidence in the system is at an all-time low, and they want answers about. So will the Prime Minister update the House on what steps he is taking to ensure that an inquiry uncovers the factors which led to these deaths, to confirm Well,
can I start by saying every mother and baby deserves safe, high-quality, compassionate care. And I want to see the inquiry at Leeds start as soon as possible. We're working with bereaved families to shape our approach and to appoint a chair who they can trust, as he knows. I have a huge amount of respect for Donna Ockenden. She's an outstanding advocate for families. We'll make sure that we select a chair of the highest standard who has the independence and expertise needed to deliver the real change that is needed.
Angus MacDonald.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, according to the Office for National Statistics, 174,000 people under the age of 35 moved abroad in the year ending June 2025. In the Highlands, this problem is especially acute. Communities. Pupil numbers are down by 40 to 50% at the schools over the last 20 years. Rural depopulation and youth emigration are too failure in Scotland, diverting away 170 million intended for apprenticeships and skills development, shows exactly what happens when opportunity is not delivered.
Well, can I thank him and tell him, alongside the record settlement that we've put in place for the Scottish Government, we're delivering huge investment in apprenticeships and offer a paid placement for every young person, which is vitally important. The SNP on the other hand, blocked a welding facility in the Clyde because apparently it was related to defence. They don't back Scottish industry, young people or national security. We do.
Pam Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is tackling patient waiting lists through NHS modernisation and reform. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that we need to tackle victim waiting lists by reforming our courts and criminal justice system?
Prime Minister.
Yes, I do, Mr. Speaker, and I've been working with victims of violence against women and girls for the best part of 20 years, and I've assured them time and again that if we get the opportunity, we would make the system work better for them. They have to wait far too long for justice, and in many cases they don't see justice at all. I'm absolutely determined that we're going to turn that around.
Final question, Winnie Morton.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised not to bulldoze the countryside, but under Labour, green fields in Aldridge Brownhills, Donnell Road, Birch Lane and Bosty Lane are now under threat. Will he accept that his housing target can be met without destroying our farmland and our countryside, but by reusing empty homes and brownfield land, or was this just yet another promise he never meant to keep?
We're not going to plough through farmland. We're going to make sensible proposals to build houses, something they failed to do in 14 long years. So young people now have not got the dream of home ownership because the inheritance we got from them. We're going to turn that around.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's question. Right, presentation of bill, Sir Purchase.
Deprivation of citizenship, promotion of terrorism or violence bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 16th of January, please, Mr. Speaker.
Friday the 16th of January. Well done, sir. Right, we now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Student Finance, Mr. Luke Charters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require the Secretary of State to review the scheduling of student finance payments to undergraduates, to require the review to consider advance provision of certain student finance payments in certain circumstances and for connected purposes. Today, I introduce the Student Finance Review of Payment Schedules Bill. A former civil servant, one of the designers of the current student finance system, once told me that the loan system has become Frankenstein's monster. Maintenance loan payment dates simply don't line up with the reality of students' lives. Rent and bills are due monthly, but student finance arrives in infrequent, uneven chunks, forcing students to budget against uncertainty or rely on overdrafts simply to get by. The system assumes a level of financial resilience that many students simply do not have. And even once students graduate, the problems just don't.
Is good, but there needs to be a positive outcome to both. Is good, but there needs to be a positive outcome to both. There also needs to be specific and clear references in the bill to no paramilitaries being permitted to serve on the Victims and Survivors Advisory Group. Will that be the case?
I have already given the House that assurance from this dispatch box, and when we come to the committee stage of the bill, we will have an opportunity to debate the bill in its current form, and the many amendments I can see have already been submitted.
Sir David Davis.
The Secretary of State has stated many times that the previous government's legislation in this area had support from no political parties in Northern Ireland. Can you tell the House which political parties support his legislation?
Now, all of the political parties in Northern Ireland that expressed their profound opposition to immunity have welcomed the fact that immunity will go under the legislation that we have brought before the House. That includes the Right Honourable Gentleman sitting next to the Right Honourable Gentleman who supports its removal. Well, indeed, the leader of the DUP. And that is a sign that the government has been listening to views in Northern Ireland, which unfortunately the Legacy Act failed to do.
Alex Burkhart, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and a Happy New Year to you. Over Christmas, in the Telegraph, 7 former senior SAS officers wrote, "In this Troubles Bill, the government is complicit in the war on our armed forces." A few days later, the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, appointed by this government, said that the bill treats veterans worse than terrorists and is, and I quote, "eating at the very fabric of our armed forces." Can the Secretary of State tell the House which former senior officers support this bill?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman, I don't agree with either of those characterisations which he has just referred to, and I am confident that the protections which we have designed specifically for veterans will change the experience that they have in relation to the legacy process. But as I've also said to the House, we are continuing to talk to veterans and veterans organisations, and I want to produce a bill that is able to offer the reassurance that they are looking for, that we have a system that is fair and proportionate and recognises the service they have given to the country.
Alex Burkhart.
Well, I note that the Secretary of State was not able to give a single example. There is, I'm afraid, an ostrich-like complacency to the government's approach to this legislation. Senior representatives of our armed forces are telling this House that the legislation is impacting morale and effectiveness. In November, 9 former 4-star generals, 9, Mr. Speaker, argued that this morally incoherent bill poses a direct threat to national security. Now, these generals tell us that highly trained members of special forces are already leaving the service. By definition, these men are very, very difficult to replace. No wonder that the Times newspaper has said that a fundamental lack of political and military understanding lies at the heart of this bill. Why does the government think it knows better than our armed forces?
Well, the government had to do something about the last government's failed Legacy Act, which had no support in Northern Ireland. And if one is seeking to help the people of Northern Ireland to deal with the continuing consequences of the Troubles, the legislation has to have that support, and the last government failed to do that. On the impact on recruitment, as he will have heard when the Minister for the Armed Forces answered the urgent question on Monday, inflows continue to improve, and inflow is up 13% this year compared to September 2024.
Paul Curley, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year. The Secretary of State was sitting alongside the Veterans Minister on Monday when I asked the Minister whether he was listening to his veterans' concerns regarding the Troubles Bill. The Minister convinced me that he is, and we've just heard the Secretary of State do likewise. But is anyone acting upon those concerns? Before Christmas, at the dispatch box, the Secretary of State promised to write to me detailing with which veterans groups he'd met, but I've heard nothing since. I also wrote to the Under-Secretary asking to meet to discuss the veterans' ongoing concerns, but I've heard nothing since. So will the Secretary of State please detail all the veterans groups he's met with and meet with me to discuss their continuing concerns?
Well, can I apologise to the honourable member for him not having received the letter to which he's just referred, and I can assure him I will remedy that very, very promptly indeed. I and the Defence Ministers have met a very large number of organisations. I would just point out that the 6 protections that the government has put forward, none of them were contained in the last government's Legacy Act. Not a single one of them. And we intend to continue to listen and to respond to the concerns that have been raised.
Ruth Jones.
Question number 3, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 3, 5, 7 and 11 together. The European Convention on Human Rights underpins not only the Good Friday Agreement, but also key international agreements on trade, security and migration. The government is committed to the ECHR. We also remain determined to uphold the Good Friday Agreement and human rights in Northern Ireland.
Jones.
Mr Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for that response. The Good Friday Agreement was indeed a proud legacy of the last Labour government. So does the Secretary of State agree that the reckless approach adopted by the parties opposite towards the ECHR risks undermining the huge progress made since 1998?
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend, and it is clear that those advocating leaving the ECHR have not given any serious consideration to the implications for the Good Friday Agreement. Indeed, when pressed on this in the summer, the honourable member for Clacton noted that it could, and I quote, take years and years to solve, so that will not be at the forefront of what we do. Mr Speaker, I would simply say that is not good enough, and those who are advocating leaving the ECHR need to reflect on what they're arguing for.
Peter Lamb.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the chaos around the world is being experienced by politicians playing fast and loose with international law, it is deeply concerning how Conservatives and Reform MPs are speaking so flippantly of the risks of violating the Good Friday Agreement by leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Could the Minister give his assessment of the risk of this?
Well, as I've told the House before, I think it would be extremely irresponsible. The Good Friday Agreement was very carefully negotiated, as the House needs no reminding, between several parties, and it would be reckless for one party to march in and seek to remove one of its founding pillars.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The European Convention on Human Rights is foundational to the Good Friday Agreement, and given that Reform and the Conservatives want to crash us out of that convention, does the Secretary of State agree that this is risking the Good Friday Agreement and that they really ought to think again?
I do agree with my honourable friend, and we need to remember that it is the Human Rights Act which gives all of us access to the rights and protections contained in the European Convention on Human Rights, and to leave it would put us alone in Europe in the company of Russia and Belarus. Is that really where the opposition want to be? Welcomed with a pat on the back by President Putin.
Chair of the Select Committee, Tony Antoniazzi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Now, my predecessor, Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, took evidence that leaving the ECHR would have implications for policing in Northern Ireland. Does he agree that calls to leave the ECHR would add to the challenges faced by the PSNI, and what assessment has he made of this potential impact?
Well, I do agree that it could have very wide-ranging implications for Northern Ireland in particular, as well as for the rest of the country. I have not made such an assessment because it's not a policy which the government is advocating. It's for those who are proposing to leave the ECHR to answer the very fair question she's just raised.
Jim Allister.
Mr Speaker, it is plain wrong to say that survival of the Belfast Agreement is dependent on the ECHR. But why is the Secretary of State so selective in his Belfast Agreement allegiance? Because it was he who implemented the jettisoning of the agreement's cornerstone of cross-community consent when he invited the Northern Ireland Assembly to continue the imposition of the Windsor Framework without cross-community consent. To the Secretary of State, is it only nationalist consent that matters to him under the Belfast Agreement?
Well, I would say to him that the steps that I took in relation to the vote on the renewal of the Windsor Framework arrangements were absolutely in line with the provisions that have been put in place by this House. And as a result, Lord Murphy produced his report, and the honourable gentleman will have seen the practical steps that the government is taking in response to the very sensible recommendations that he made.
Mr Speaker, how will the Secretary of State be responding to troubled stakeholders groups that say that their members' rights under Articles 6 and 8 of the ECHR are being impugned by his maladroit Troubles Bill?
Well, it is for all those who wish to argue about the rights that they feel that the ECHR and the Human Rights Act gives them. I would simply say to the honourable gentleman that in bringing the bill forward, I have certified as the Minister responsible that the bill complies with the European Convention.
Alex Easton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State, is it not the case, as a matter of international law, that the United Kingdom could withdraw from the ECHR while at the same time ensuring that equivalent rights and protections are preserved in our domestic law?
The honourable gentleman is, of course, correct to say that it is possible for signatories to the Convention to withdraw. It's a very bad idea, and the government doesn't support it.
John Cooper.
Speaker, does the Secretary of State not agree with expert opinion that says that while we remain signatories to the ECHR, we will not be able to protect our veterans from vexatious litigation?
I say to the honourable gentleman, as I've said many times in the past, there is no such thing as vexatious prosecutions, and the ECHR protects the rights of all of our citizens, including the veterans who served with such distinction in Operation Banner.
John Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Continuing cost of living crisis. Sorry, number 6. You correct me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Northern Ireland's economy is one of the strongest of any part of the United Kingdom. It has the lowest unemployment, and economic growth outpaced the UK in the year ending Q2 2025. This performance is being supported by this government's policies, including significant investment in economic development and a record settlement for the executive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A continuing cost of living crisis and a recent budget that failed to support workers, families and businesses in a meaningful way. Now, it's not often that I agree with the First Minister, but with absolutely no action to address lagging productivity. She's right, isn't she?
Well, the Northern Ireland Executive has very considerable responsibilities in respect of the Northern Ireland economy. I note the fact that the Finance Minister has published a draft 3-year budget. It is the fact that we had a 3-year spending review that has now given the Northern Ireland Executive the opportunity to do the same for the first time in a number of years. As the Minister said, there are choices that the Executive has got to make. It's true of all governments around the world, and I look forward to seeing them coming forward with a proposal for a balanced budget.
Hannah.
Thank you. The Minister will be aware that for a number of months I've been raising question 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since becoming a minister in the Northern Ireland office, I have met with executive ministers, building on the instinctive engagement of my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State. Our discussions have been wide-ranging, including around economic growth and transforming public services.
The Minister will be aware that for a number of months I've been raising concerns about the Local Growth Fund and its impact in Northern Ireland. Just before Christmas, organisations got the devastating news of a large cut to the Local Growth Fund, which will devastate a number of support jobs and work helping vulnerable people into meaningful employment. Will the Minister outline what steps the NIO will take to prevent the loss of those crucial support jobs and help put in place those services to tackle our low productivity?
Can I just pay tribute to the great work done by the voluntary sector in Northern Ireland? I do know this has been a difficult time, which is why our engagement has been so important with the sector. That engagement, I can assure my honourable friend, will continue to be important, especially as we launch the Local Growth Fund, £45.5 million a year, Mr. Speaker, to support growth in Northern Ireland.
Eastwood.
As we've just heard, Minister, Northern Ireland is operating in a considerable budgetary constraint. The Local Growth Fund, as highlighted, is going to cause huge damage. What can you do to assure my constituents in Lagan Valley and across Northern Ireland that you will listen to our concerns and act on them?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have put a record settlement into Northern Ireland, £19.3 billion. Obviously, that can be used to support people. The Local Growth Fund's been built for a year, has been set aside to make sure that we can support those groups, and I'll continue to engage with them during that period.
Catherine Vokes.
Question number 10, Mr. Speaker.
This budget provided Northern Ireland with an additional £370 million on top of the record settlement of £19.3 billion each year on average over the spending review period. The decisions we have taken will ease trade within the UK and ensure families across Northern Ireland benefit from help with the cost of living through policies like cutting energy bills and lifting the two-child benefit cap.
Thank you. And as the Secretary of State said, 370 million for the Northern Ireland Executive at this year's budget and 505 million for Wales on top of the settlements announced at the spending review shows that this government takes supporting the devolved nation seriously. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that cooperation between the UK government and the Northern Ireland Executive, like the other devolved nations, is crucial to pulling children out of poverty, improving public services and kick-starting growth across the UK?
I do agree with my honourable friend, and that is why the government's decision to lift the two-child benefit cap was widely welcomed in Northern Ireland. I would also point out that Northern Ireland is being funded slightly above its level of need. It gets 24% more than equivalent spending in England, and that means that the executive has more money to make its decisions with.
Mr. Speaker, when the executive was restored 2 years ago, there was a transformation fund put in place to allow the transformation of public services. As of yet, that money hasn't been fully allocated. Will the Secretary of State use his offices to encourage the executive to actually implement that transformation fund to transform Northern Ireland public services?
Well, the Public Services Transformation Fund is a very important demonstration of the partnership between the UK Government and the Northern Ireland Executive. As the honourable member will be well aware, the first 6 projects were funded and they're making good progress. The Transformation Board is currently considering bids that are coming in for the next phase of funding. We are, of course, as is the Executive, keen to see that money spent to support the process of transformation, which is hugely needed in the way in which public services are delivered in Northern Ireland.
Sarah Purchin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 12.
Secretary of State.
The whole House will agree that we owe our Operation Banner veterans an enormous debt of gratitude. That is why the government is introducing 6 protections for veterans involved in legal processes relating to their service. We are confident that this will change their experience, ensuring that the process is fair and balanced.
Sarah Purchin.
Thank you for the answer. Does the Secretary of State agree with the Northern Ireland's Veteran Commissioner that this Troubles Bill treats our brave veterans more harshly than terrorists?
I do not agree with that assessment. I've had many discussions with the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, and I think if one looks at the facts, including the prosecutions that have taken place, there have been prosecutions of paramilitary terrorists than there have been of any soldiers at all. Indeed, one conviction of a soldier for a Troubles-related offence in the last 27.5 years.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, may I extend a warm welcome to the President of the House of Representatives of the Netherlands and his delegation who are with us in the gallery today. Prime Minister's questions, Ruth Cadbury.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by saying I hope all colleagues had a happy Christmas. It probably feels quite a long time ago now, but not for reform, of course, because today is the day that they celebrate Christmas in Russia. Mr. Speaker, on Monday I visited Reading, where I met with people who will benefit from the first freeze in rail fares for 30 years. Mr. Speaker, that's on top of other measures we're taking to tackle the cost of living, £150 off energy bills, more free breakfast clubs and raising the minimum wage. And there's much more to come this year, Mr. Speaker, as we turn the corner. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I stood side by side with our European and American allies and President Zelensky at the Coalition of the Willing meeting in Paris. Mr. Speaker, we made real progress on security guarantees, which are vital for securing a just and lasting peace. Along with President Macron and President Zelensky, we agreed a declaration of intent on the deployment of forces in the event of a peace deal. Mr. Speaker, we will set out the details in a statement at the earliest opportunity. I will keep the House updated as the situation develops. And were troops to be deployed under the declaration signed, I would put that matter to the House for a vote. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in the House, I had further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leaseholders in my constituency and across the country are being fleeced by freeholders and managing agents. And they need relief from both, and we need to end the feudal leasehold system. So, could the Prime Minister confirm when the leasehold and common hold reform bill will be coming to Parliament?
I thank you for raising this important issue. We are taking serious action to deliver homes the country needs and provide homeowners with greater rights, powers and protections. We will publish the draft bill as soon as possible, and I'll update the House. More protections, of course, are already coming this year because we passed the Renters' Rights Bill, stronger protection for 9 million renters, abolishing no-fault evictions. That's the change we're delivering. And who voted against it? Tories and Reform.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, may I welcome the Prime Minister's efforts to advance peace in Ukraine and his joint statement on Greenland. The last few days have seen significant international events: the US operation in Venezuela, threats towards Greenland, and an agreement to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine. So it is frankly astonishing that the Prime Minister is not making a full statement to Parliament today. No Prime Minister, Labour or Conservative, has failed to make a statement to the House in person after committing to the deployment of British troops. His comments about making a statement in due course, quite frankly, are not good enough. It shows a fundamental lack of respect for all of us here and the people we represent. Mr. Speaker, the US is Britain's closest military ally. However, we are clear that the sovereignty of Greenland is sacrosanct. So can the Prime Minister tell us what influence is he bringing to bear with the US administration to ensure that is respected?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear about what was agreed yesterday, because military plans were drawn up some months ago, and I've updated the House in relation to that. Yesterday was a political declaration that sits under those military plans. If there were to be deployment, there would have to be a legal instrument. Mr. Speaker, deployment would only be after a ceasefire to support Ukraine's capabilities, to conduct deterrent operations, and to construct and protect military hubs. Mr. Speaker, there will be a statement to the House at the earliest opportunity. There could hardly be an opportunity. They claim they want to know about this, and they're trying to shout me down. Mr. Speaker, in relation to the House, if there were a decision to deploy under the agreement that was signed yesterday, then I would put that matter to this House for a debate beforehand and for a vote on that deployment. That is consistent with recent practice, and I'll adhere to that.
Mr. Speaker, why is today not the earliest opportunity? The truth is, the Prime Minister does not want everybody in this House to be able to ask him questions. So he leaves it just to Prime Minister's questions half an hour. On Monday, at least his Foreign Secretary stood up for 2 hours and 15 minutes. You know, it was a non-event, but at least she did that. He is scared of us being able to ask him questions. Yes. 6 questions. Yes, he's here.
Please. I've also requested that we do need an early statement. This House should always be informed first. So I don't like the chantering. Let the questions continue.
Well, one of them asked that he is here. He's got no choice but to be here for Prime Minister's questions. That's why he's here. If he could skip this, we know he would do. But back to the matter at hand, Mr. Speaker. We all agree, all of us here agree, I think most of us here agree, that NATO is the bedrock of our security. The future of Greenland is of fundamental importance to the future of the alliance. And I am sure that the Prime Minister agrees that it is essential for NATO leaders, including and especially the US, to meet. Will the Prime Minister call for an urgent meeting of NATO leaders?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she says she wants to hear about Ukraine. She's got 6 questions. She's not even asking a second question about what we did yesterday. She's got the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, in relation...
Sorry, can I help the Prime Minister? You don't need to worry about the responsibility of the questions of the opposition. That's the...
Mr. Speaker, NATO is the single most important and effective military alliance the world has ever seen. In the 18 months we've been in power, I've done everything within my ability to strengthen NATO. We had one of the strongest NATO meetings last year, the summit, where we had more members of NATO and more unity. When I arrived back to the House to make a statement, which of course she asked for, her position was I shouldn't have missed PMQs, I should have empty-chaired the NATO summit. That's how serious she is about NATO, Mr. Speaker.
Kemi Badenoch.
You didn't answer the question, Mr. Speaker. I asked him if he would call for an urgent meeting of NATO leaders. We can all see that the situation is moving rapidly. I also note that he has still not had a call with President Trump. That is concerning 4 days after the events in Venezuela. But yesterday, he announced that Britain and France had signed, he says, a political agreement to put troops on the ground in the event of a peace deal in Ukraine. So, given the Prime Minister is not making a statement about that deployment of British troops abroad, one of the most serious decisions a government and a parliament can take, irrespective of what he says, can he at least confirm how many troops would be sent to Ukraine and whether they would be in a combat role?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I was with NATO allies yesterday, all day, in which we were discussing security in Europe, in particularly security guarantees for Ukraine, and we made significant progress. And I'm glad that she has welcomed that. Of course, I will speak to President Trump. I spoke to his senior advisers yesterday. We were with them all day. But, Mr. Speaker, she asked me about the deployment. We released the statement yesterday. It's clear from that, but I will be clear with the House that there would only be deployment after a ceasefire. It would be to support Ukraine's capabilities. It would be to conduct deterrence operations and to construct and protect military hubs. The number will be determined in accordance with our military plans, which we are drawing up and looking to other members to support. So the number I will put before the House before we were to deploy. But I'll do more than that. If we went as far as a legal instrument to deploy, which would be necessary, I would